Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are returning, welcome back. And for those of you who are here for the first time, my show is about celebrating artists and their body of worth. And that's artists from all walks of life. I've been fortunate enough to interview actors, directors, playwrights. Sometimes all three categories fall under the guise of one person. There's so much to our guest today. I'm so excited that he's here. I'd like to give a big shout out to Carol O'Shaughnessy, who suggested that I reach out to Jack Neary to do this interview. And luckily for me and all of you, Jack said yes. So Jack, before we start, I want to put things in perspective with where we are in the world right now. Today marks 415 days since our theaters shut down on March 11th of last year. And I want to ask, how are you doing really in the midst of this crazy world that we find ourselves in right now?
That's an interesting question because I would say about a month ago, it really hit me how extraordinarily difficult it's been for those of us who do what we do. And it's gotten to be a little bit of a cliche to say that, sure, you're an actor or you're a writer, or you're a director, or something like that. But that's just what you do for fun, right? I mean, you don't really do that for a living. And then you say, well, okay, but you've been watching. What have you been doing through the pandemic? You've been watching Netflix. You've been watching Prime Video. You've been watching. This is what we do. We make these things. Mm-hmm. And even though the business is starting to come back a little bit now, it's going to be a while before a lot of those pieces of art are going to be cranked out again. Mm-hmm. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm as you say, I've been doing a lot of those things that you described, but I'm principally a playwright. And as a playwright, I get my royalty check August and February. And for 2020 and 2021, they're going to be pretty skimpy. So it is something that we all have to take into consideration. But those of us who have been trying to hang in there, we're doing the best we can, I guess, is my answer to your question.
Well, let me ask you, as a playwright, right now, so many people are not able to do live theater for all of the obvious reasons. Yeah. Do you get any royalty checks when theater groups are performing your plays online? How does that work? And have you been surprised, either pleasantly or otherwise, to see some of your works being produced out there virtually?
I have received some either checks or info or acknowledgement that they were going to be done. I don't know that I've seen any yet because they're still in production. One of my plays is called Jerry Finnegan's Sister, and a couple of theater companies have, usually high school theater companies, have begun to produce that either online, either in a Zoom situation or performing it for a small audience and then streaming it. So I've actually written a couple that I have seen performed because obviously I'm in charge of them. And I found that plays written not for the Zoom format, at least for me, are really difficult to watch. And people are getting, actors and directors are getting much more clear. I saw one today in the Boston Theater Marathon, which is broadcasting a 10-minute play every day. That had a sword fight in it with two people in two different locations, actually choreographing a nice little sword fight on Zoom. So I have been, and since that time I've written 2 or 3 plays for Zoom, and I've done them through the company I work with, Acting Out Productions Newburyport. And it's easier when you have that kind of control, when you know you're writing for Zoom, and you can actually use the Zoom process and the language to make it work. But it's just so, and another thing I just found out about one of the high schools that's doing my play Jerry Finnegan's Sister is that they're going to be doing it with masks on. I can't imagine it. I can't imagine, and I'm sure it's being done. I can't imagine what it must be like to take an actor and take this part of his face away from him or her.
I feel the same way as an audience member. I know that so many of my entertainer friends are so anxious to get back on the boards, as well as I am. This program came out of COVID for me.
Yeah.
I'm anxious to be on, but as an audience member, or as someone who really relies on an audience for the work that I do, I want to be able to see their faces completely without the mask. Maybe the mask shields, would be one way of going. But even then, it's something that is always there as a nuisance. But I feel the same way about seeing some of the mics that I see actors wearing on stage.
Yeah, you can kind of get used to the mics, especially if they're the tiny ones, that little stick on the side of the head and things like that. But as a writer who writes predominantly, but not exclusively, comedies, I dread the notion of 50, 100, 250 people sitting there trying to laugh through those things. And not only that, this is another tricky thing for comedies. What you like with a comedy, naturally, is to have a bunch of people sitting together, like shoulder to shoulder to get the laughter going. There's always somebody in the front who starts it. But if they're separate, little groups of people, little 2 or 3 people here, one person there, spread out through a 300-seat theater with like 50 of them there. Whew, I don't know what it's going to be. I have a couple of productions that are one scheduled for July, actually, and one scheduled for like 15 months from now. No, 9 months from now. And I'm just hoping that by that time we can get some shoulder to shoulder stuff in there. It's hard to tell what's going to happen. It's hard to tell what kind of rule they're going to throw at us at any given moment. I'm just not looking forward to dealing with audience reaction. Beyond that, how are they going to show up? I know, as an audience person, I would be a little bit squeamish about showing up to a live performance now, but we really want to get back to it. We really do, and I know audience members do too.
Well, I want to. Would you consider going back and some of your previous plays, creating or updating them for a Zoom audience, or do you want to keep them as they were originally intended?
Well, I certainly hope we don't have to do that, but
not either.
If that becomes a thing, sure, I would rather work on them to make them work in Zoom than obviously to not have them produced. Except, this is the first time anyone has asked me this question. So I think if I think about it for 15 minutes, I'll probably say, no. I have a play. It's called First Night, and it's opening. We're actually going to run it at the Deer Trees Theater, which is a great old summer theater up in Maine. And I can't do the play unless the last moment of the play comes together, which is when these two characters who've been fighting actually come together and kiss. I can't rewrite that. The whole play is based on that moment. So, I check at the beginning of each month. I say, how you guys feel now? We have your vaccines? Are we going to blah, 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 blah? And, I cannot do this play without the intimacy. There are a couple of my plays that you can get away with without that kind of intimacy. But I suppose we're going to have to try to get around it if things somehow don't improve or improve less than they have been improving. But I just hope not. Well,
I hope not as well. But I've had the good fortune to interview so many people from all different walks of life in this business. And some of them have embraced this time as far as their art is concerned. And others have been frozen in their tracks. You personally, has this time forced you to write even more so than you have in the past? Or how has this affected you?
I'm going to say not more so, because I pretty much, this is a terrible word to use, but I'm going to use it. I crank stuff up relatively regularly. And but I really haven't stopped. Since last year, I've come up with at least 3 new pieces of material. and added to material that I had been working on. So I really haven't stopped. It's been much more difficult. I'll tell you why, because I do a lot of my writing, and I know a lot of writers do this in a cafe. I live in southern New Hampshire,
Mm-hmm.
and my favorite place has been the Barnes and Noble Cafe in Manchester. And I haven't been going there for 11 months. I just started because I'm fully vaccinated, and I just started a couple of weeks ago. And it's so great to be back there. I wrote like maybe 3/4 of my last play, Trick or Treat, there. And it's just, you go, you sit down, you write for a while, you put your head up, and there are humans walking around, and it's like a pleasant atmosphere. You don't see the four walls.
When you're writing, you go into a zone.
I go to Barnes and Noble, if you call that a zone. Yeah.
No, I mean, where you forget the fact that people are all around you.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say my zones last too long. They probably last 5 or 10 minutes, but you get into a nice little rhythm, and something's coming. And when you're writing plays, especially if you're someone like I am, who's been an actor, you're saying the lines in your head, and you're listening to them, and they're going right into the keyboard. So you get a scene going, you get a scene going, you get a scene going. And then you get 2 or 3 pages done, a nice scene done, and you sit back and take a breath. And it's just good to be in civilization. I have, of course, especially editing and things like that. I come back to my office and work there. But I have to tell you, the biggest thing I've missed during the pandemic has been able to go out, sit in a cafe, and work like that. And they're very nice to me at Barnes & Noble, by the way.
That's great. Have you ever experienced writer's block? If you crank them out the way, as to use your word.
Well, it's probably because my stuff. I'm always dumping on myself, but I mean, maybe my stuff isn't deep enough to have writer's block for. But no, I have gone into periods where, like recently, it's just been, oh my God, when is this going to be over? I just don't feel like doing anything today. So I don't know if we can legitimately call it writer's block, but just like pauses and yeah. So not really.
I want to talk a little bit about your process. When do you have spurts of energy or inspiration when you sit down to write, or do you sit down and wait for everything to start coming through?
I usually get a really strong idea for a play. It's based on a person I know, or even more often, an actor I know. Like I wrote Trick or Treat for Gordon Clapp, and I get the idea, and the story begins to germinate. I may write 2 or 3 pages, and then I'll let it go for a while. I run and I walk a lot, and so what I'll do is I'll just let these things sort of jumble themselves around and find their way into a story and different characters, and then I'll sit down and whoosh, it comes out. I wrote a play a few years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, which is where I met Gordon. He did my play Auld Lang Syne, and that, once I had the idea for that one just came right out, and it was very, very easy to do. So what I do is I walk, I run, I ruminate, and then get it right out there like that. My other play that I wrote for Gordon, Trick or Treat, was a lot longer, just getting together in my head, and we went through a bunch of readings and rehearsals, and that was a much longer process. But it's more a matter of thinking it through, waiting for the moment, and then letting it happen.
Now, as I said at the introduction, you are an actor, you're a writer, you are a director as well.
Yeah.
Which of those hats, and perhaps it's the playwright, I don't know, which of those hats fits the most comfortably for you?
Oh, definitely writing, definitely playwriting, but I wasn't. I didn't start writing plays until I had acted for many years and directed for many years, and it really, really helps to know what it's like to be out there, and you edit in your head when you're out there, because actors are going to edit in the rehearsal room. There are lines in my plays that actors have improvised in the rehearsal room. So there's no question that writing has pulled it all together.
Mm-hmm.
I started out as an actor, and I really enjoyed doing it, and I do it every once in a while. But there was a block. I ran into some serious stage fright about 30 years ago, and it's never left me. Came on one night, boom, like that. And so as an actor, that's something that I've been struggling with. I get myself out there, but it's much more difficult than it was when I was much younger. But directing is something that just came naturally for, as far as, whatever pays the bills, and I seem to be okay at that. And but the writing came after the acting and directing, and the writing and directing really helped. I mean, excuse me, the acting and directing really helped the writing. Really did.
Now, Laurence Olivier also suffered stage fright late in his career. Yeah. He said the same thing. It just happened one night.
Yeah.
What happened in your instance that caused the stage fright?
I know exactly what happened in my instance. I had been my training ground was the Mount Holyoke College Summer Theater in Western Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And I was that year, we used to put together 7 adult shows and 3 children's shows in 10 weeks, which is a lot to do. And that year I was the artistic director, the producer, and an actor. And we were doing everything. And I could, back then when I was very young, I could put a script in my head like that. Mm-hmm. And I was playing George in Of Mice and Men, George and Lenny. And if you're aware of Mice and Men, if you take your yellow highlighter and you highlight all George's lines, you might as well just take a yellow highlighter and paint every page. He never shuts up. And every once in a while, Lenny will say, well, what do you think, George? And that's pretty much it. So I went out there on opening night. It was directed by my great friend, Gloria Muzzio. And I was playing George, rehearsed it in a week, Tuesday to Tuesday. And it was all there. It went really well. So I came back in. We had a great opening night. I came back out the next day and looked at there were a couple of reviews on the wall, and the reviews were all great. But one son of a bitch put in a little note. It looked like Jack Neary had some trouble with some of his lines last night. What I wanted to say was, I was acting, you jerk. Couldn't you notice that? But it stuck with me.
It's always that one.
And I went out that night, Wednesday night, and I stopped 4 times. Just stopped, and nothing was there. And poor Lenny, they got Michael Walker, the guy's playing Lenny. Well, George, you think you should say whatever, he would just get me into my line. So ever since that time, I've been on stage maybe, 50 times since then. Mm-hmm. But that moment has just it's never left me, and it's made me less of an actor, because I don't have that kind of freedom anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you, as you play your character, we're starting to get feedback again here. Is anything open? Did a window open or something? We're getting feedback. No, now it's gone again. The gremlins are out with us today, Jack. But when this was happening, did you feel that you had stepped outside of the character itself, and that thought process was going on in your head throughout your performance?
Sure. I mean, all of a sudden, whatever it said, oh, that guy last night said I had some trouble with my lines, and all of a sudden it's gone. And it was in the arena. It was in a theater in the Round. So there were 350 people surrounding me. And Of Mice and Men is written in 3 acts. And this happened in the first act. And I went off stage, and we have 10 minutes. And there's 8 million people bustling around, getting and I'm running around saying, I can't go out. I can't go out there anymore. I can't go out. We have to tell the audience Jack is sick. I can't go out. 10, 9, 8, 7. And I went out there, and my first scene was a long speech with a good friend of mine, and it just sort of came back. But it was an absolutely frightening moment. So frightening that I've never, ever, ever let it go. I've been to hypnotists. I've been to this. I've been to that. Nothing. I remember the Olivier story was that he used to hire an understudy, or the understudy would stand in the wings so he could see him. And he knew that if he stopped, because what you're not afraid of is being in front of an audience. You're afraid of stopping the flow of the show. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Olivier, from what I read someplace, knew that if he stopped, this guy could come in and take over.
Well, let me ask you, let's talk about criticism for a moment, since you bring that up, and it was one person's critique of your work. How do you process criticism?
There was one play I did. I actually acted in my own play first night a million years ago, and I remember I didn't read any reviews at all. They told me they're good, you got to read them. No, I'm not going to read them. As a playwright, it's almost impossible not to, especially now. All you have to do is, click your name and there they are all over the place. And I'm not going to say they don't affect me, because they absolutely do. But you just have to know, you have to trust that if the audience is enjoying it, or you think they're enjoying it, and they tell you they're enjoying it, you have to say to yourself, well, this woman didn't like it. And you just have to live with it, which I despise having to live with it, by the way. But it's our own fault, because if they say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, we're going to take that sentence and we're going to stick it in the paper.
Exactly.
And so if we're going to keep doing that, we're going to have to keep allowing them to come in and say what they want. Well,
I'll tell you something funny. When I did my first stock season, I was doing the Diary of Anne Frank, and I played Peter. And one critic said that it was the greatest portrayal of a young man going into adulthood that he had ever seen on stage. The Utter critic, and we called him the Utter critic, his name was Robert Utter, and I remember his name. Robert Utter said, I did more facial mugging in one scene than Carol Burnett did in her entire career. And they both were at the same show. So
what do you do?
Like, who do you listen to? Who do you want to believe? But I want to ask you, as a playwright, is there a particular review that sticks out for you that impacted your life as a playwright, either positively or negatively? And if you can talk about that for a moment.
I don't know that if anything jumps out at me that has affected me, because usually if you're in a theater situation, usually there are 3 or 4 reviews. And fortunately, I've been fortunate. I mean, a lot of the critical stuff that has been written about me has been relatively okay. I did get angry a couple of years ago when somebody called me Leary instead of Neary. I remember that. I made sure they took care of that.
Was that intentional on their part?
Oh, I think so. No, I don't know. Probably not. But I mean, if you're going to dump on, it was a negative review, of course.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to dump on somebody, at least get his name right, for crying out loud.
Right.
No, I wish I had a better answer for that, but I really don't, because there've been, I mean, a lot of reviews, and nothing really jumped out. Oh, okay. Well, the first time we did the second time we did my play First Night in Boston. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember. His name was Kevin Kelly. He was the principal theater critic for the Boston, and he was big. He was powerful, and he called my play a lovely riff of magic, and we're still using it. I remember when Kevin Kelly came to the show, everybody knew he was there. It was a theater in and around, and he had demanded, I think, or asked that 4 seats be left empty next to him. I have no idea what the deal was with that, but he didn't want to be sitting next to anybody. But we came to the curtain call that night, and it was always a big standing ovation. And I just watched him, and he sat there with his pencil in his mouth like this. Didn't get up. Just sat there like this. I said, well, he's not running out. That's probably good. And then he wrote just a wonderful, wonderful review. So that was early in my career. So that really did affect me. So yes, there is that answer to that. Yes.
Now, I have a question for you. You've written a lot of plays that are adaptations of classic books and stories, everything. As you're writing something that has already been written or based on something that's been written, what is your process for making it your own version of the story, like A Christmas Carol or Dracula, that we all know so well?
I think what I keep in my mind at all times, this goes back to starting as an actor and as a director. I think what I keep in mind at all times is the audience and what audiences, at least in my mind, what audiences really, really, really care about beyond the sets, the costumes, the even the lines or the actors or the makeup or anything else, is that all they really care about, bottom line, is what happens next. They need to care about what is going to happen next. They need to, because if they don't, they're going to just, nod off. They're going to, so I think when I adapt plays, if they're kind of like I did the Fall of the House of Usher and the Turn of the Screw, which are both, well, Usher's a short story, but Turn of the Screw is a novelette, small. But it's prose. So you just have to get to the point where you say to yourself, okay, you have to make the language legitimate in terms of its period, but you also have to give it that contemporary feel so that the audience member doesn't lose caring about what's going on. And also, back again, you just have to make sure that it never gets to the point where they don't care about what the next thing is going to be, especially if you're telling a thriller story or something like that. You just have to stay on top of it. So I think what I keep in mind more than anything else is the audience and what the audience cares about.
Now, are you able to juggle? And what I mean is, are you able to write several plays around the same time, or do you stay strictly focused on one play as you're writing?
No, I never stay strictly focused on one play unless it's going right into production, and I'm in rehearsal for it. There's nothing I like more than being in a rehearsal room with a new play and a good director and good actors. And so that's when the focus comes into just one piece of material. Otherwise, you have to juggle because you don't know what the next one that works is going to be. So I'm always doing that. I write a lot of stuff for children now, kids, audience, young audiences, because I've been working with this group in Newburyport, and I'm always juggling things. I'm always writing you remember the old fractured fairy tales from
yeah, of course.
TV. Well, mine are kind of like that. I mean, it's just something, and so, so there's always a kids play going on. There's always an adult play going on in my head. But when I get into the rehearsal room, it's all about that particular play.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you started out as an actor. When you were a small kid, did you grow up in a home that had exposure to the theater? When did you first discover the theater?
Our home really didn't have exposure to the theater. We had exposure to shows. I have if you see any of my plays, I have an Irish Catholic background, and the parish show was a thing every year. So both my parents were singers and performers, and so that was something that we really focused on. But I think I didn't become a theater person until I saw it might have been Pearl Bailey in Hello, Dolly.
Wow.
Every year I was in a marching band. Let me go back. Okay, I was in a marching band, the Sacred Heart Band, and every year they took us to New York to and we were part of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. It was a blast every year. And every year we took in a Broadway show. So I probably saw that Hello, Dolly when I was.
And what a great perspective to see New York as well.
Say what?
I said, what a great perspective to be able to see New York from a parade route.
Oh, sure. You start off on 44th Street, 43rd, 44th Street, and it's cold in between those buildings in March. Let me just tell you. And then you walk from there all the way up to about 88th Street from Fifth Avenue. It's a blast. It really is. It was such a great thing for kids to have. And then we saw a Broadway show, and I saw different shows like that. But I also recall when I was young, maybe 17, no, let's see, maybe 13 or 14, I went to the movies one day at the Strand Theater in Lowell, and I saw a double feature of The Music Man, and I stayed for the second feature, even though I wasn't interested in it, and it was Gypsy, the Rosalind Russell version of Gypsy, which, despite the fact that Merman isn't in it, is not a bad movie.
No, I agree with you. Totally.
But I just fell in love with that atmosphere my God, that whole the traveling vaudeville burlesque atmosphere, really. And since that time, Gypsy has become I think it's the best musical that
I
exists.
agree. Totally agree.
And so that day, that rainy afternoon in Lowell, Massachusetts, seeing Robert Preston and the Music Man and the Gypsy, that really solidified my interest in show business more than anything else.
But what was that? Was that the moment that you said, "This is what I really want to pursue? I want to be a part of it"? And
yeah, but you can't say that when you're a little Irish Catholic kid in Lowell, Massachusetts. You can't say that. What you have to do is think about it quietly for 10 years, and then you go. Then I acted in a play in college, and that was the first time I started acting. Yeah, I wasn't like a crazy show business kid. I played baseball, I played Little League, I marched in the band, I played trumpet and things like that. But I didn't really let my theater ambitions start to fly until I was a college student.
And you mentioned both of your parents sang as well in the parish plays.
Yeah.
What was the response when you said that you wanted to pursue this as a career?
Well, my father had passed away by that time, and my mother, it was never anything but encouragement. But it wasn't like crazy encouragement. Oh yes, I love you. It was just, oh, this is what you're going to do. And the other thing that helped is that I got on stage pretty quickly. And I remember my first couple of plays in college. I played the telephone man in Barefoot in the Park. And if you do that part right, man, the laughs are huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my mother would come and see it. Oh, he can do that. And then I played Finch in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. And if that works, and you can succeed doing that, and you do that in front of your mother when you're in college,
if you can succeed,
there you go. So I think she just saw that it was going to happen, and then I ended up going to grad school in theater, as Bill Smitrovich mentioned in one of your broadcasts at Smith. We were both Smith College grad students back in the day. So yeah, it didn't start. I didn't really start acting or working in theater at all until I was well into my college years.
Now, did you get your equity card there, or did you come to New York to get that?
No, I got my equity card by accident. Mm-hmm. I had a SAG card because I did. I think I put on one of my resumes things. I did back in the mid '80s, later '80s. Parker Brothers came out with VCR Clue. Which was a VCR game. Was so difficult to play. And I played Professor Plum in that. And it was a bunch of Boston actors that got together to do that. And they were all SAG actors. And Parker Brothers didn't think that they'd have to pay them much. And they all got together and said, hey, wait a minute. We're in the union here. And Parker Brothers says, oh, yeah. So that's how I got my SAG card. And then I accidentally got that. And then I was doing a show at the Merrimack Repertory Theater as a non-union actor, and the guy, Jan Shea, who was the producer, said, "Wait a minute, you're in SAG." Yeah, I am in SAG. I got to give you an equity card. So he gave me an equity card. So that's how I got that.
Now, from the moment that you were familiar with what equity was and is, did you pursue your equity card, or did it just happen, by happenstance, just as you just described here?
Well, right after that is when I went to school. I went to grad school. So I didn't pursue it as a professional. I really never pursued acting as a professional because I got into directing and producing. And when I did work as an equity actor, it sort of came as part of a job that I was already doing, either as a director or as a producer. But I've remained in the union for however many years that is, 35 years. Still pay my dues.
I do too. Yes.
And when I
and they just went up.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said they just went up.
Yeah.
Yes.
But when I do, I obviously I work equity. My last equity show was a couple of years ago. I finally got to play. I was so fortunate. I was able to play nicely in Guys and Dolls. So I got to sit down, you're rocking your boat in front of a huge audience. That
must have been a thrill. Wow.
Oh my God. I never thought I would. A friend of mine was directing it. I said, well, who do you have for Nicely? He said, I don't know. I said, well, he's kind of age neutral. He can be any age, right? I said, yeah, he doesn't have to be a fat guy, right? No, you can just change the lines. And said, well, cool, let me do it. And I did it. And I had more fun doing that. I did it 40 times.
Do you prefer
to get back to my other story?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I did it 40 times, but I had all Nicely's lines written on the sporting news newspaper that I had as one of the racing touts. I had them all there. I did it 40 times and I never looked at it, but I had those lines with me. It's one of those things I could never, ever let go, that stage fright.
Do you prefer musical comedy, drama? Do you have a preference?
As a what? Writer?
As an actor?
Oh, I really don't have any preference. I just have preference for really good theater, really good roles. I've been fortunate ever since I did that Barefoot in the Park thing a million years ago that I kind of know how to work a laugh line. I've done a lot of Neil Simon. I mean, Neil Simon just jumps through my writing too. I mean, I can't. It's hard to avoid because he just knew how to take a normal little line and give it a little bit of a twist and make it funny. And so I think comedy, when I get a chance to do it, comes a little more easily to me than other things. So I really, really enjoy doing it. But no, I just like when a role is written really well and I get a chance to play it.
Now, I want to go back to your writing. Did you write prior to doing playwriting? Did you keep journals? Did you write novels, books, anything before the playwriting began?
I kept a little bit of a journal. Actually, I've been keeping a journal since 1972. So yes, I wrote some short plays in grad school. Bill mentioned him too. Len Berkman was a professor there, and I wrote some short plays there. And I knew that I could do that because I had been acting in plays. But no, my writing as a career really has only been playwriting, and that didn't start till late too. That didn't start until like the later 80s. When I started writing plays, although that seems like a long time ago now, still, I wasn't much of I didn't write. I wrote a few short stories. I sold them to Catholic magazines, believe it or not, and things like that. But no, playwriting has really been the thing.
Now, I've asked people who write books this question. When do you know that it's ready to go to the editor? When do you know that the play is right to get into the hands of a theater company? And as you're writing a play, do you mentioned sometimes that you think in terms of the actor that you're writing for? Do you ever write plays in terms of the theater that you would love to see the shows produced in?
No, I don't think I've ever done that. Maybe, Jesus, I probably should start that. That sounds like a good idea. No, I write with actors in mind, and the process is usually getting it down on the paper. But once it's down on the paper in a first draft, I'm not a big draft guy. First or second draft, you have to get it into the mouths, the hearts, and the minds of good actors. So what you do is you round up some friends, or you go to an organized play reading situation and hear it there, because it doesn't really count until actors start to contribute to it. But once that happens, and you see that it's working, then it's a matter. Then the really, really, really hard part comes, and it remains hard for me, is to get it into the hands of someone who's interested in it and really understands, where it's coming from. So, I mean, the truth of the matter is, you really need to know somebody. You really need to get it into the hands of somebody who can bring it to somebody else. For my play Trick or Treat, which we did off Broadway, I had worked with Gordon, and I met Gordon after we did Auld Lang Syne, and I gave him the first act of Trick or Treat in a little diner here in Derry. And he read it and he said, "You got to finish this." And then he gave it to Carol Dunn at Northern Stage, and ultimately it was read up there in a reading series and was produced up there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I knew Gordon. I knew Gordon because I knew Andy Dolan, who was a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things. Rarely. I mean, I've often said, as far as sending plays out cold is concerned, I've often said I might as well just take the scripts in a bus and throw them out the window just to see if anybody grabs them. Because my friend of mine, Spiro Valutis, he used to be the artistic director of Lyric Stage Company of Boston. He brought me in his office once, and he opened the bottom drawer of his desk, and there were piles of unread scripts there. He says, this is what I have to deal with. And this is what they get. So you send them out cold. If the person doesn't know who you are, nothing's going to happen. It might get read by an intern or something like that. And if the intern isn't a 55-year-old Irish Catholic from Boston, that theater is not going to pick up my stuff.
What was the first play that you got produced?
It was First Night, which is the play. It's 35 years old and it still works. I wrote that as a one-act play for the Worcester Foothills Theater, and it went so well that I expanded it to full length, and then it was done at Mount Holyoke, and finally the first professional production was at the Merrimack Repertory Theater in Lowell, and then it was produced professionally in Boston and then New York.
Now, is there, I mean, at any given time, what was a moment where you had more plays running at one given time than any, and are you able to get to all the theaters and see these shows?
Well, I'm not in the sphere of folks who have plays running on Broadway or anything like that. But I have a bunch of plays produced. So a lot of when things are going well, when we don't have a plague, there's Jerry Finnegan Sisters happening in the air. First Night's happening someplace else. I have a new play called Kong's Night Out that's been out for a while. So yeah, they get done here and there, but I don't get a chance to see them too often. I'm often not too crazy about going to see my stuff because I direct my own stuff so often that I'm a little bit skeptical and critical and crazed to see my stuff. Well,
I was going to ask you. I mean, when I back in the 80s, I was with a group called the Script Development Workshop, and it was really geared at the playwright more so than the actor. But they had a pool of actors that they would bring us in, and I was very, very fortunate. I was in my 20s, and I was doing a lot of play readings, and it was a great time for me. There were two types of playwrights. There was the playwright who would sit back and really listen to their words unfolding on stage. And then there were the playwrights, and you could see them, who squirmed with every single line. Are you able to just release it completely, check your ego at the door, and let the actors do what they need to do? And I'm not talking about the play itself. I'm talking about those first table reads.
For the first read of Trick or Treat, I stood in the back of the theater and paced, which is what I do for every show of mine, every performance. I can't sit. And I walk up and down. This is even for a reading. I'm walking up and down, up and down, up and down. And when a joke line comes, I stop. I wait for the joke to land. And when it lands, if I hear a laugh, I start walking again. So it's and what I think is happening is I'm controlling the whole situation. Of course, if I stop, that means they're going to laugh. I mean, it's crazy. So I don't know where I fit into your category, but I don't think I fit into either of them. I'm the guy who's pacing on the other side of the room, controlling the whole reading that way. So I think if I had to sit down, I would be a squirmer. I would definitely be a squirmer.
Now, a play like Trick or Treat, which played 59 East 59th Street here in New York, it was a successful run there. Do the theaters contact you and say, Jack, what else do you have for us?
Oh, I wish they would. The problem with Trick or Treat is we did it in January, and it was literally 5 degrees that particular January every night. So we didn't get huge crowds. We weren't even able to get, and I still don't understand this because I had Gordon Clapp in this play. We weren't even able to get the Times to come to look at it. So it didn't really get that kind of exposure. And I haven't had an agent for a few years. I did for a while. So I haven't had that kind of fortune to be able to have people knocking down the doors. So most of the stuff of mine that gets produced, I either generate it myself or it's stuff that I have published that gets produced around and about.
So you're very proactive in terms of getting your work out there.
I think you have to be. I mean, I certainly have to be at this point. It would be nice. I've always said this, and this is why I'm still doing this. It would be nice if one of them hit, just one of them, hit big, like mammothly, because there are so many others that I have that people could conceivably do. And I've come. This is why I think I told you the other day. I think if I ever write an autobiography, it's going to be called Almost Famous. It's not, so I've been on the fringes for some time, and I've written stuff I know audiences like, but it's just a matter of, fortunately running into that moment, that moment in time when it gets in front of the right people at the right time. And I actually feel strangely good about knowing that I'm still doing this, and that can still happen. I mean, I know I play First Night and To Forgive Divine and Jerry Finnegan's Sister and The Porch and King Kong's Night Out and Trick or Treat and Old Lang Syne. They're all there, and they've all received at various times in their existences standing ovations from audiences. So I know audiences like them.
Now, The Porch, is that your most recent play?
No, Trick or Treat's my most recent play. Okay. Well, actually, I've written 2 since then, okay. but I haven't even gotten them out there. The Porch is one that's sort of evolved from another play of mine called Beyond Belief, and that's been around for about 10 years.
Now, The Porch, according to your press, says that it is to Eastern Massachusetts what Steel Magnolias is to the South.
Isn't that a great quote? My God, I love that. I stuck that on the book, and oh my God, it is to Eastern Massachusetts what Steel Magnolias is to something Louisiana.
Yeah, so I got it right. So where did that quote come from? You know what?
I don't know. It's I would have to look that up. It might have. It probably came from the production we did near Boston in Stoneham. We ran for like 6 weeks there, and it probably came out of that. But The Porch is 5 mature citizens, people, talking. I was how can I guess I can do this. The first scene in The Porch is 3 mature women around 70. And they start their discussion with the Clinton Monica Lewinsky situation, and it evolves into one of the old ladies explaining to the other old lady what oral sex is. Now that seems like a little scary topic, but you put it in the mouths of 3 outspoken elderly ladies, it gets pretty funny pretty quickly. So that's the beginning of The Porch, and then it evolves into a really nice, difficult story about relationships and friendship, which is what it is.
And these are based on the people that you know. Are they out of real situations?
My mother used to sit out in the porch with Mrs. Lally and Mrs. O'Neill, and I went over to visit my mother one day, and she walked in the house and she said to me, Mrs. Lally just explained oral sex to Mrs. O'Neill. And I said, well, I don't know. I can get 10 minutes out of that. So I got 10 minutes out of it. And since that time, it's evolved into a full-length play called The Porch.
And where would you like to see, I mean, do you have anything currently on the works that you're working towards that is in that limbo state right now with everything reopening soon?
I actually have a lot. You mentioned Carol before. I'm working with Carol O'Shaughnessy on a play called The Rat Pack and Me, which is a nice little story that Carol told me. And I'm also working on a brand new musical. Do you remember? I'm sure you do. Well, do you remember Von Meter?
Oh, yes, of course.
Well, my friend Andy Dolan came up with this idea about doing a play about Von Meter because obviously he had a mammoth career for 11 months in 1962, impersonating John Kennedy, which his career came to an end. Boom, November 22nd, 1963. And then his story after that was pretty interesting. So I put together a musical which has a lot of people in it. We did a reading about a month ago with Gordon Clapp in it, and the guy who played the lead for us. We have an older Von Meter in the show, 55, and the guy who played the lead for us was Ernest Thompson. You know who Ernest Thompson is? Ernest Thompson wrote On Golden Pond.
No, that's right. That's right. Of course, yes.
He lives up in New Hampshire now, and Gordon mentioned we should have him read it, and he read the play for us, and we had a great reading with some terrific Boston actors. So that's out there. That's called The Jester of Camelot. So those are the two of the things I'm working on now. There are 2 or 3 others too happening. I have a new play called Moonglow that's going to open in 2022 up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Mhm. I love this idea about Von Meter, because I know so many people in the lookalike world or the impersonation world, and all it takes is for the celebrity that they impersonate or perform as to make that one gaffe. And we live in an age now of cancel culture,
Oh my God.
where their careers can be over like that, based on something that the person that they're performing as said and does.
And all Meter was doing, and the audience, I mean, his audience for those 11 months loved him. Kennedy himself thought he was pretty funny. Jackie wasn't too crazy about him, but the president was.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like a gaffe that he made. He was extraordinarily successful. He was on Ed Sullivan, on Andy Williams.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was a terrific piano player. And that's what he ended up doing. He ended up playing piano in a little bistro in Maine. And so we follow his career past November 22nd. And it's a pretty interesting story.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, based on the world that we're living in right now, the world is changing so rapidly. A news story is completely an old news story an hour later. And we're living in a culture where political correctness is putting a pall over a lot of writing and everything, both positively and negatively. What are your thoughts about, as a writer, in terms of being, excuse the word I'm going to use, woke in today's world?
I'm having some difficulty with it. This is a little bit of a revelation, but perhaps not to my friends. I'm a lot more conservative than a lot of my friends. Matter of fact, I would never put anything political on Facebook because I'd lose all of them. I'm not a raving lunatic, but I'm just much more middle of the road than anybody else.
Well, you know, last night, excuse me for interrupting for a moment, but last night I was watching Late Night on CNN. They're doing a story on the beginnings of late night television. And the thing about Johnny Carson is that no one knew if he was Republican, Democrat, because he joked about it all. And he walked that line through his entire television career of not going too far to the right or the left.
There was a genius about Carson. I think he's more and more respected every year. Because you watch the late night stuff now, and then you go back and you watch a Tonight Show sitting there at 12:30 at night talking with Gore Vidal or somebody, and Carson can go from Rickles to Gore Vidal just like he was brilliant. Johnny Carson was. He really was. I know he had his writers and everything, but he knew what he wanted and what he needed for his audience. And that's really something.
You were saying that you're conservative, and your thoughts on this woke culture that we're in right now.
I just find it very difficult because because of the extremes that we seem to allow it to go to. I don't have any specifics in my head because there are 6 new ones every day. It just seems to me that the common sense just needs to be embraced a little bit more, and we need to allow a little bit less of this. Again, I wish I had some specifics, but I'm not good at that. I just have a negative feeling towards not allowing all opinions in without being immediately canceled, without having everybody at Simon and Schuster get together and write a letter and say we can't have our company producing this guy or publishing this guy. Why not? Just don't buy the book. I just don't get I don't understand the cancel culture thing. I get it. Of course I understand it. I just don't like it.
Well, the whole idea of theater is to provoke thought. And if we eliminate that, where we're afraid that we're going to offend someone. I remember doing Children on Their Birthdays by Truman Capote. And the Truman Capote estate gave us permission to do it as long as we did not change one word of dialogue. And the N word was used in the play. And one of the actresses, the night before we opened, said she would not go on unless that word was changed. She had been through the entire process, the rehearsal process. This was a leverage that she thought that she would be able to pull off.
Wow, that's
And
not
I
fair.
said, it's a word that offends me to no end. But I grew up in the South,
Oh,
and I heard people use that word like you and I would say hello.
yeah.
That's who they are.
Yeah.
And to deny that character being their authentic selves on stage, the audience should be shocked when they hear that word in the theater.
Yes.
And we can't just eliminate that.
So what happened with the actress? What happened with the show?
I spoke up, and and after I said, what I had to say about who these people were, she got it. She got it that it was important for that character to say those words. Well, Jack, I can't believe this. I'm going to tell everyone, if you don't mind my saying this, a couple of days ago, Jack said, are we going to have enough to talk about? And here we are at the end of our show. I want to let you know, this has been a delight for me. I hope it has for you as well.
Oh, I love it.
And you're welcome to come here anytime you have a new project or anything that you want to talk about. Don't be shy. Reach out to me and let's talk about it.
Oh, that's great. I'll keep you posted.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. If you enjoyed the show, and I hope you did, and if you don't do so already, please, please, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube. If you like this show, please hit the like button. Leave a comment if you can. We're always about building our audience. Jack, I'm sure, will agree with me on that. So anything that you do to help spread the word helps all of us. I also want to let everyone know that if you're around tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, I'm going to be celebrating Paul Manchin. He is a Canadian singer-songwriter, musician, and actor. And his music, I've been listening to it. It's phenomenal. I can't wait to introduce him to a bigger audience. He's got hit records, everything throughout the world. So give him a little listen. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the third name that pops up, pick up the phone and call that person. Not an email, not a text message, not a private message. Pick up the phone and call them. As my dear friend David Friedman says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And you never know what someone is going through right now. And another friend of mine says, but if you're going to be in a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. Think about that. Now, Jack, I'm going to leave the stage and give you the platform to yourself. You're going to have the final word. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone right now. I thank you for the gifts that you've given to the world and that you will continue to give to the world. And your body of worth is always celebrating. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. So I'm supposed to say something now?
Yeah, you've got the final word.
Oh, final word. Okay. Well, I just want to thank Richard. I had no idea what to expect from this interview, and what I find surprising and refreshing about it is that he talked about the work, and I really, really appreciate that because we don't get the opportunity to do that too often. So if you get an opportunity to speak with Richard sometime, I say take it because you'll talk about things that you really care about, and you'll hope that you'll show enough. You'll be interesting enough to have other people care about the work as well. So that's my final word. Thank you, Richard.